a bad girl for good. I think we both know we've done more for words. So why you saying my name like a curse? Why you saying my name like a curse? I've been thinking I'm better off dead. Does not matter what I do or what I say. There ain't no glory in a life lived too long. Ain't nothing special about singing a song. Quit your crying and casting a bruise. Once a bad girl for good. And if you're hungry, do not be ashamed. If you ain't hunting, then you probably the prey. If you ain't hunting, then you probably the prey. I crossed the oceans and meadows of green. I love my lovers loyal to only me. Of earthly pleasures you can have your fill. I only want to eat the things that I kill. I only want to eat the things that I kill. I only eat the things that I kill.
Hello everyone. So I don't necessarily have anything particular planned to chat about today. I figured I would do a bit of a crafty update, an introverted, witchy, crafty update. I have no idea what the lighting is currently like in this shot. I'm kind of semi-functioning with window light, sort of. It's too bright if I have the curtain fully open, so it's sort of semi-closed. But then the rest of the lighting in this room right now are fairy lights that I recently put in because the top part of the room was looking a little bare, and now it doesn't look so bare. But I don't know if they're going to agree in general with the camera. For anyone who's worried, although I very much doubt there is, this iron is not on. I know you can see it, and it's decidedly unaesthetic, or whatever, but it's there because I've been using it today. So I just got back from running some errands. I had to pick up a print that I went and got framed about a week ago, which was really exciting. I was really looking forward to being able to pick it up. It looks amazing. I'm really happy with it. It's not my artwork. It's the work of Lauren Marks, who, those of you who have seen room tours in this room before, will remember that I have above the desk another Lauren Marks image of a fawn, a baby deer, with no head, and, you know, bird's nests bursting out of the place where the head and neck should be. So same artist. She has an entire book that I want to get at some point, someday, called Sacred Decay, which is just exactly 110% my vibe. So I had, in the last year, been lucky enough to be able to get one of her signed prints, or no, it might have even been the year before or so. Essentially, it's been sitting, waiting for me to be able to have the time, energy, and money to get it framed. I was originally going to try and just find a cheap frame that fit it, but it was one of those things where any standardized sizes weren't going to work, so it became a whole sort of neurodivergent person has to wrap their head around budgeting kind of thing. So I've finally done that. And now I can finally hang it up, and I'm really excited about it. It's not going to go in this room, it'll go in a different room. And I want to spend maybe the rest of the day actually rearranging the art and prints that I have literally all over the place in this apartment, because at the moment it's a bit chaotic. The rearrangement is also necessary because I recently had to move an original painting that is very, very important off the wall where it was, because we have a hole in our ceiling in that room, and it was raining in, still is. So, you know, adjustments were required. The joys of renting in Ireland. But anyway, first world problems in a way. So yes, I've just come back from running errands. I am a bit frazzled and a bit tired. For anyone wondering, yes, I absolutely did go like this to run errands. It's amazing how you can be standing there fully draped in black and everything and looking very, very quiet and introverted, earbuds in ears, listening to music and everything, and people will still talk to you. I ended up at the bus stop sandwiched between two people. At first it was this one lady who was asking me about the print that I was holding, so I was telling her about the artist and so on. She said, you know, did you get that from TK Maxx? And I said, oh no, it's actually an independent artist. I've just been to the framer's shop, which is why I'm here near the shopping center. So she was sort of chatting about it, but then commenting to me about literally everything she could see, including the, you know, Christmas tree decorations directly outside the shopping center. And then another bloke came along and sort of stood on the other side of me, so I became very sandwiched with my frame, like in the bus shelter, which was raining in, by the way, because it's an Irish bus shelter. And she started talking to him, saying, do you live around here? No, I don't live around here. Oh, are you going Christmas shopping? Yes, I'm going Christmas shopping. Oh, what else have you been doing? Oh, I just came from a shave. You did not. I did. You did not. I did. Well, I would go back and get my money's worth, because he didn't look shaved. But it was just one of those things where, like, they're doing this, actually down here, because, you know, height. They're down here going, oh, I'd go back and get my money's worth. What do you mean? I have been for a shave. Oh, and I'm like standing there with this like semi-decaying unicorn print, going like, how do I end up in these very enclosed specific types of chatty scenarios when the last thing I want are enclosures and chat. Anyway, it wasn't like perfectly lovely people, just talking to someone who will be friendly and talk if you talk to me, but only because it's polite. So I'm a little tired, a little frazzled, but I survived being rained on because homemade stuff in non-synthetic fibers keeps you dry. So do layers, and layers keep you dry. So anyway, I'm sort of hunkering down for the rest of the day to do a bunch of crafting. I'm working on a new corset. The one I'm currently wearing fits me like a glove because, of course, I made the adjustments to the original, I think it was a 1913 pattern back when I originally started, but I added a spoon busk, I increased the curves and so on and so forth. If the video is still up, I'll link that somewhere, but where I kind of discuss some of the adjustments I make to my corsetry. It's actually an older corset in that video as far as I remember, I think. A corset that in a way I actually made too large, and that's the interesting thing about this whole sort of process. But anyway, I'm making a new one. I'm doing a 1906 pattern. I believe it's 1906. I have the pattern over there, but I'll knock things over trying to get the papers out. So it's a 1906 pattern, and the structure, rather than like this one where the panels are very sort of straight up and down and then the curvatures are just drawn into all of them, This one has separate shaping panels. So this is a back piece of one side, two back pieces of one side. So this actually goes like this on this side, comes around here, and this is the beginning of the curvature over the curve of the hip. Similarly, the front piece has gores and things in it to accommodate the bust. And then the seams, I don't know if you can see in this light, but the seams are actually quite curved. And then again, that curvature goes over the curve of the hip. And the two pieces connect at the top, and then there's a hip panel that in this case is made of several curved pieces. It was interesting kind of sewing these because it felt a little bit like sewing a football or something along those lines. You can see, even independent of boning or anything, I've ironed it so that all of the seams are super flat and everything, but it starts to kind of create its own shape anyway. And then if you can imagine the two front panels kind of pulling the bottoms inward, what you kind of get is this flare that doesn't rely on the straight grain of, say, this corset, where sometimes, depending on how puffy and swollen I'm feeling at the end of the day, it does create just a tiny bit of pressure, specifically right there. That's really the only spot of discomfort in this particular corset that I'm wearing. So I'm experimenting with a few other patterns, trying to see if there are certain adjustments that I can make to my usual everyday corset type. The aim, though, is to pick something that then doesn't require me to rejig all of my bespoke patterns too much. So for example, this top that I'm wearing is an older one made of linen with buttons on the sleeves and so on. And I made it before I made the corset that I'm wearing now. But the aim for me is that should I need to adjust underlayers, I like to be able to do so and still, by and large, have my clothing fit. I don't want to have to go remake an entire wardrobe every time I change an underlayer. So, in general, the shapes that I'm aiming for need to be able to overlap with, roughly speaking, medieval silhouettes. For example, this top is more medieval inspired than some of my others. Sort of 19th century-esque sleeves, but then the actual bodice shape is a medieval inspired shape with the spiral lacing down the front. So the point is that in general, I tend to go for late 19th century, early turn of the century corset shapes and so on, and skirt shapes that kind of overlap with the second wave pre-Raphaelite kind of medieval throwback stuff that was happening at the time, so that should I choose to apply medieval techniques, I can do so in a way that art historically evokes the tail end of the 19th century. I'm a little bit less specifically in 1850s, late 1840s, 1850s kind of pre-Raphaelite, Gothic, aesthetically minded kind of person. I would say that my preference is very much closer to the turn of the century. Maybe 1880s in terms of torso shape a lot of the time, that sort of natural form betwixt the bustle eras kind of shape, insofar as it overlaps with turn of the century, Edwardian, second wave pre-Raphaelite kind of shapes, especially in the sort of middling to lower classes, people that were expected to be able to move about and do things with their day. So hence the choice of 1906 for this corset. I am going to be making it with a spoon busk in the front because I find that that's the most comfortable for me. The aim is not ever to tight lace, and the aim is also not to overly compress. I like a sort of a sense of deep, consistent, gentle pressure, but I don't like there to be any one particularly strong pressure point, and I don't like to feel overall restricted. I like to have freedom of movement, the ability to move around and so on. The only type of movement that is, for me, generally restricted in a corset is forward bending from the lower back, which is good because I have an injury back there, so, and at the top of my back, actually, I have multiple back injuries. So I will say that the reduction of tendency to slouch over myself is a good thing. But that's the only real reduction that, in terms of movement range that I tend to experience. I can, of course, put my shoes on and take them off in corsetry, no problem. So this is the mock-up that I made. Weirdly enough, I made it in linen, which is a very expensive material to make a mock-up in. However, this was the only sort of sturdy, relatively non-stretch material that I had to use for mock-ups. All of the old bed sheets that I normally use for mock-up material are not suitable for testing a corset that's going to eventually be in couture. I have so much yardage left of this particular type of linen. It is dead stock, furthermore, from a fashion house that was no longer using it. So, you know, I think the corset uses like what, less than a meter of fabric really. So I felt relatively justified in trying this. What was also useful about it is that you will see there is a striped texture to this material that follows the grain line, which meant that it was really good for practicing making this corset out of, because the pieces themselves follow different grain line directions. Some of them in particular are on the bias, but you need to get the bias just right. It's not like it's only a 45 degree or something like that. I have here actually the rest of that linen material, so see if I can grab it without knocking things over. Heavy. So I have tons of this. I'm very lucky to have it. It's incredibly stiff for linen, very thick. So I have used it for making a walking skirt. I may do so again, depending. The walking skirt I made out of it was a test of a, did I do it with 4 or 5 panels? I think it was a 5-panel skirt, but while it works, I think there are certain improvements I could make to that pattern. So at some point in the future, I will be making, I think, another walking skirt out of this material. I toyed with the idea of making trousers, sort of vintage inspired trousers out of this material. But again, I think the texture of the material would make the inseam kind of an awkward place. Again, it's very stiff as well, so I think it's the sort of thing that if it had to take a lot of that kind of movement, it might actually wear fairly quickly. So part of the reason I have so much of it, but I'm also taking forever to use it, is I'm trying to figure out what would be one of the best types of projects for this. Arguably, with the stripes, it might make a really interesting boned vest or something of that nature. Waistcoat or something. So anyway, if anybody has any ideas, I would welcome suggestions, just so long as I'm not obligated necessarily to follow them. I have a whole bunch of projects currently underway. I recently did actually finish my first ever pair of socks using DPNs, double pointed needles. 5 double pointed needles for my first pair of socks. But it turns out DPNs are really easy to use once you get the principle of it. It's like there's an initial adjustment period and then the rest is just following the knitting pattern or recipe as per usual. Currently, people may remember these from last winter, my homemade house shoes. As you can see, they don't have the leather soles on just now because last year I used rubber cement to glue the soles onto the shoes, but didn't quite do that process correctly. But luckily for me, I was able to take them off really, really easily, so without damaging the under layers of canvas and so on that I had placed there. So what I'm doing currently with these, and it's taking me forever, it's very, very slow work, is I'm using waxed thread. I don't know if you can see it all. I'm using waxed thread. Here we go. To stitch them back on properly. Again, these are not meant to be outdoor shoes at this stage. They're just house shoes. I probably will take them to the local cobbler and have him put replaceable rubber soles on the bottom. But not necessarily because I want to wear them outdoors. I do find that this leather in my household right now specifically is a bit on the slippy side. It probably wouldn't be for most people, but I'm exceptionally clumsy. My partner literally had a nightmare last night where he and I were in some high up place apparently, and I needed to jump a small distance, and he said very small, and somehow I did it wrong and I fell a great distance, and he, like, in the dream had to call emergency services and was like terrified and really upset. And he told me this morning, and you know what? I feel a little called out. Because I have absolutely needed to jump small distances before and immediately hurt myself instead. So the poor guy has nightmares apparently about me hurting myself doing very, very simple things. So hence the potential need for rubber, slightly more grippy soles. So long as I can get them replaced and that we can minimize the use of rubber, I think that would be really good. So I'm finally getting around to doing that though, especially because the task is so, you know, it involves literally having the shoe in your lap. The lasts are currently back in them. And, you know, slowly stitching and pulling and stitching and pulling and making sure that I'm not snapping anything, making sure that the thread is waxed enough to help strengthen it and so on. And yeah, it's one of those things that in theory I was thinking to myself, oh, of an evening I could have that be my current handheld project. Sometimes it's knitting, sometimes it's experimenting with freehanding needlepoint lace. Other times it could be the shoes, but then I realized, as per usual, I don't know if you can tell, stitching black on black on black in the evening is, can you even see this shoe if I hold it like this? Like you can't even see it against me practically, and this isn't even evening. So I do find that I keep assigning myself projects in dark colors in the evening, and that is a terrible idea. One thing I could use this striped linen for actually is to make a really sturdy kind of work apron, which might work because then I would have a contrasting color on my body against which to see black threads when I'm stitching or knitting or something. So, you know, there are possibilities. We'll see. We'll see. What else have I been working on lately? A lot of this stuff, as I've said before, ties directly into my understanding of witchcraft. I often read tarot in the lead up to beginning a project and at key stages throughout a project. I will curate the music I listen to, curate the scents and smells that I wear as I'm working on a project. Sometimes certain projects, like, you know, borrowing from the idea of the structure of crafting a corset, will then kind of have a sympathetic effect on the magic that I conduct around my house. So it's not unusual for me to develop certain costuming goals and clothing goals that then have a direct impact on the changes I'm able to make in my own lived experience, both at home and also in facing the real world and so on. And at the moment, there's been a lot of stuff that I've been working on with the introversion and the quiet of winter. I'm a midwinter child, you know, Sagittarius, and I prefer the dark and the cold and the cozy. I prefer the fairy lights. I prefer listening to music of an evening and stitching. I prefer winter cooking. So I'm actually going to be hanging out with some friends soon and hosting a dinner. I'm going to be cooking medieval food, and they're going to be bringing some like cheeses and fruits and things. It's going to be great. I think they're even bringing honey roasted pears. I think they're going to be making honey roasted pears, which is a great medieval option. So I haven't yet decided what I'm going to cook, but I know that modernly I'm going to be adding to the list. I make a mean homemade eggnog, which we're of course going to spike with rum. I make very, very good eggnog. And I don't whisk the egg whites, so it's a pourable, no egg white topping kind of situation. It's refrigeratable. So we'll be doing that for sure. And I also every year make really, really good, they're supposed to be ginger snaps, but they're more like a sort of spiced ginger, slightly soft cookie, or I really can't call them biscuits. They're snaps basically, but they're sort of rendered slightly differently. And I know that these are good because I've literally had people who've been angry at me try to still get me to make them, the ginger snaps, without having to talk to me. You know that that's a toxic person, but at the same time, it is an indicator that the cookies are good. Like, they hate you and they don't want to talk to you, but they need to figure out a way to get your cookies. Yeah, so anyway, good times, good times. Let's see, what else? I mean, in a way, that's kind of it. Like, isn't that what winter magic kind of can be, right? A lot of my own witchcraft and magic and so on is essentially those kinds of daily activities. You know, if it's putting on a certain scent in the morning or donning certain jewelry, if it's a lot of the time when I get ready, for example, or if I'm getting ready to do a crafting project, I'll light incense and specific candles just to get some of that setting right in my brain. They don't have to stay on the whole time. But it is a little bit like a quick visual cue. Very, very simple things, non-expensive ingredients, that kind of thing. Again, kitchen witchery is a huge deal for me, and it's much easier for me to conceive of that in the wintertime. I think a challenge in the coming year will be to make sure that I actually keep doing that, because of course it's also, in a way, good self-care. It structures your time, it helps you feed yourself more healthily, it helps you eat more seasonally. So kitchen witchery is a big deal that's more immediate to my awareness in the winter, but is a good note for carrying forward into the year. Yeah, so it's a lot of quiet, candlelit crafting, music, historically involved cooking, coming up with artistic ideas slowly and sort of documenting them. I recently shared another poem on the blog to do with aging, wherein I linked certain musical tropes and specific tunes in, and sort of explained some of that process. I'm thinking soon I may share, I did a sketch a while ago of, I guess you would call it a nightmare. Parts of it were definitely a nightmare. But it was also kind of a sort of a world-building style dream. So I did a sketch of that a while back that I may share a scan of at some point on the blog. And I also recently had a very intense dream that somewhat uncharacteristically I did journal most of it out. My dreams are usually frequent enough and complicated enough that it can be a bit of a chore to journal them all. So usually I'll just every now and then, if something really stands out, I'll journal it through and kind of think about what I feel the significance of it is. And in this scenario, I paid a little more attention to detail in the journaling process. And then I went to the altar, like this was the next morning, journaling about it. I went to the altar shortly thereafter, having felt that I synthesized a good amount of the content of the dream and felt sort of a little bit more solidified because, again, I don't have good dreams. I have complicated dreams at best. And then I did a reading at the altar with actually the Margaret Peterson Tarot and the Heart of Fairy Oracle. And the cards that I got reflected the content of the dream, visually as well. The part that feels the least coincidental is the visual bit. Even though I did not choose the deck intentionally for that purpose, once again, my tastes and my imagination, visually speaking, are very similar. They both come from me, and I use my witchcraft to talk about them, and I use them to access my witchcraft. So it does make sense to me that seemingly accidentally that morning I might have chosen a deck that if certain cards came up, they would essentially be scenes from the dream. But the layout of the cards specifically, the progression and the way the reading unfolded, especially in conjunction with the Heart of Fairy Oracle card, really put a new angle. It reflected the dream right back at me, but also helped supplement the journal entry I had already written. And that felt incredibly special. And all of this currently, again, with this idea of crafting, making certain clothes, I have other fabrics that I'm working on for outer layers. My body has changed enough in the past year that I've actually gotten myself around to understanding what my needs are even better. So I'm currently working on, very, very slowly, but currently working on a few outer garments, including a duplicate of this skirt because I wear it so frequently that the thing needs a rest and time for when I want to repair it. So I do need one other of it. That'll be enough of that. But anyway, with all of this stuff that I've been working on, corsetry, underlayers, skirt layers, working through the shape and fit of the tops that I want and so on, thinking through things like structure and then ornamenting on top of that, making art historical references on top of that, having all of that thread back in and out again, not only of my witchcraft, but of my poetry and words of power. This has been the theme in particular, in general in my witchcraft, but actually quite intensely the last few months. And one of the things that has come out of that and is also feeding right back into that is the notion of personal boundaries and limitations specifically. So from a unverified personal gnosis perspective, if I think of that in terms of, if I think of that as being under the auspice of the Morrigan, which I do, that plays into this notion of enclosures and boundary keeping and sovereignty, and the kind of toing and froing that is required for healthy sovereignty, flexible stability, right? So again, as I was saying, basically with all of these ideas around structure and agency, around crafting as well as craft, around food, around sovereignty, around embodiment, magic, personal gnosis, sightedness, all these themes that I talk about all the time, but that have been heightened lately. I've also been working on the idea of personal limitations, on protecting of boundaries, specifically house guardians, actually, of certain specific types with certain specific sets of themes and ideas worked into their imagery and worked into what they're made of and so on. And how, like, that's emerged out of all of this work and it's feeding right back in again. It's this incredibly reflexive nature that I feel is part of what makes the craft element, the doing of witchcraft, so potent. So, you know, one can have the themes present as one reads through things, or as one studies mythological stories, or as one goes to the altar to commune with deity and pray, and or write channel poetry and so on. There's the conceptual, there's the study, and then for me, there's the taking of the study and the conceptual right into the lived sensory, to some extent, consensus reality-based part of things. So again, choosing a certain scent of a given morning, lighting a certain type of incense or a certain candle at a certain time of day specifically, an acknowledgement of this or an offering of that, yes. These are some of these more overtly witchy things. Reading tarot, astral travel, going into the labyrinth, as I often call it. But then coming back and placing those otherworldly elements on the body, or carrying them out and about with you, or decorating your space with them, and having them talk right back to you about your own personal agency, your own personal tastes, while also reinforcing where your limitations are, where I end and someone else begins. Remembering to value that component too. So when this is what I'm trying to get at, I suppose, is when I say house guardians or boundary keeping and so on, I don't just mean self-protection as in I'm paranoid and things are coming to get me. I mean more in the sense of reminding me where my space exists and being in my agency in that space, but then bringing that flexibility, that dynamism, that dynamic nature to bear on it. Being flexible and adaptable to the extent that I'm able when I'm out and about. Being flexible and adaptable to the extent that I'm able at home. You know, I can have very intense relationships at times, and being able to approach those relationships with a much healthier sense of you are you and I am me. You know, less codependence, less Not that I'm overly sort of entrenched in these things, but I find them very interesting to think about, especially insofar as they, I suppose, intertwine with visible self-expression that other people can perceive. So I have no idea if any of that has made any sense, but essentially that's what's been going through my mind with like a constant backing musical track at the moment of certain types of music specifically, and certain overarching themes and questions and visuals. And it all feels very relevant too, of course, coming up to Le Birthday, December babies, near Christmas. I have to give my parents credit actually for not overly blending my birthday with Christmas growing up. These days I find that a bit difficult. It's a bit weird living in a Catholic country, having grown up in a sort of puritanical Protestant one. Again, take that with a grain of salt. I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. And hope that whatever the heck this is, I'll probably I assume I'll have interspliced some crafting footage, but we'll see. So I hope everyone's doing well, taking care of themselves to the best of their ability, and being kind. And I'll see you all next time for some other kind of rambling witchy chat. Bye.